Good morning. I'm Mark Bialik, Director of Membership and Post Operations for SAME, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. I'd like to welcome everyone to our webinar on behalf of the Society of American Military Engineers. We hope you find it valuable to you and your post. As a matter of housekeeping, if you have a question, please type it into the GoToWebinar toolbar on the top right-hand side of your screen, and we will try to answer it as they come in. So, welcome to our Best Practices webinar, which is about the Rock Island Post, working with Boy Scouts of America. The Boy Scouts of America and the Learning for Life program are partner programs of ours, and they're currently involved with dozens of our posts around the world. Now, allow me to introduce our presenter. Our presenter is Roger Perk, the Chief of Engineering and Construction Division at the Rock Island District of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, overseeing project design and construction for numerous navigation, ecosystem restoration, and flood risk management projects and programs. He has 27 years of technical and management experience working with the federal, state, and local organizations on management and technical issues on the Mississippi and Illinois rivers. He has a BS degree in civil engineering from the University of Nebraska, Lincoln, and a master's degree in civil and environmental engineering from the University of Wisconsin, Madison. Thanks, Roger. We appreciate you being here. Please feel free to start your presentation.
All right. Good morning. Thanks, Mark. As Mark said, I'm Roger Perk. We have been working on the Engineering Merit Badge along with the Boy Scouts of America for 7 years now. We have a very good partnership and relationship both with the Boy Scouts and with the city of Davenport, Iowa, their Public Works Department. That's actually where our Boy Scout Merit Badge has been hosted for the last few years. Having a good facility is really important. Somewhere where there's sufficient room that you can spread out, you have enough room for all the different facilities that you need, as well as things like parking and being able to move around, all those types of things. So we've been very appreciative that the city of Davenport has been teaming with us on this. When you're thinking about your facility, think about what type of apparatus is available at that facility. The Scouts like to be able to do a lot of different hands-on things, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the future. But if you can find a facility where you have engineering type equipment that you can use that is readily available, that is definitely a plus. And also think about the size of how many Scouts you may be able to fit into your facility. One of the things that we did early on, the first year we did it, the Merit Badge, we had about 80 Scouts. We found that was a little bit too many to start out with in our first year. Just the logistics, keeping all those boys interested and moving always in the right directions. I would suggest around 60 is a good number unless you have a lot of volunteers and you have some experience. But early on, I probably wouldn't go more. Somewhere between 40 and 60 would be the most I would do. The best place to start if you're setting up a Merit Badge program is to go to the requirements. We get all of our requirements from a website called meritbadge.org. All of the different merit badges and all the requirements are out there, as well as worksheets that can be given to the Scouts to help them to, as you're going through, to identify what key information they need to know. And all that is located on the website. If you do choose to use those worksheets and pass out to the Scouts, one of the good things a lot of times to do is tailor it towards the pieces of the event that you're actually doing. You need to meet all 9 requirements, and I'm not sure if you can read those on your screen or not. We will talk about each one individually, but the best place to go is meritbadge.org. But in many of the areas it'll say do 1 of the following or do 2 of the following. So we have identified those areas where we're going to do 1 or 2 of those individual items and then tailored our worksheets towards those. Okay. So here's a rundown of the 9 requirements. And I will talk about not only what the requirement is, but then what we have chose to do under each of those areas. You have a lot of flexibility in picking what types of events, what types of activities you want to do under each one of these. And in some areas we've combined some pieces, and I'll talk about that a little bit. To have each one very specific, it's set up for a a Boy Scout working individually with their counselor or with their scout leader. So some of them are, discuss at length or do research and turn in a paper. Well, when you're doing that in a workshop setting, that is really just not very attainable. So we have set it up to have dialogue back and forth with the scouts, but each scout's not turning in an individual item. Now, in some troops, depending on the counselors, some counselors will require the scouts to do some additional work at their own troop before they actually get the merit badge from their troop's point of view. We go through all 9 requirements, and we tell the counselors that we are meeting all the requirements, and the Boy Scouts have gone through and looked at all the requirements we're doing, and they agree that we're meeting all the requirements. However, some Boy Scout troops and counselors do go to a higher level and want to see that individualized work that each of the scouts have done. So you may run into that. You may get contacted by some counselors occasionally and say, where's the piece where they actually filled this out? And you have to explain to them that we went through it in a group setting. If they want that individual work done, then they need to work individually with their scouts and the forms or the worksheet that they filled out when they were here with us. The first requirement is select a manufactured item and investigate how it works. What we're working on, or what we're using for that example, is we're using circuits. We're using a ground fault interrupter demo. We're working with them on AC and DC power, and also doing a small demonstration on how solar power works. So in each one of these, it's important to look at the requirements, see what's required, and then find the piece that best fits in for you and what you have available, not only for personnel to train that piece, but also actually having the equipment or the apparatus where you can train it. For the circuit one, those are fairly readily available. Batteries, different colored wires, lights, fans, different pieces you can hook up and show them how circuits work. The second requirement is select an engineering achievement that has an impact on society and research and discuss. A good number of the volunteers that I have are on the civil engineering side of things, so we have geared that towards more of a civil engineering application, although you could do it for any different type of engineering. We have been focusing on bridges. So we are taking the scouts through how you take soil borings for a bridge, how you identify different types of soils, how you go through screening, Atterberg limits, show them all the different types of techniques we use for soils and for soil borings. Then we're also taking them through the structural side, where we are talking about and showing them beam deflections. We're using 2x4s, and in one case we're standing them on 2 on end together. Another one we're putting them flat so they can see the different deflections. We'll have the boys stand on them in each case and measure what the deflections are. Put 2 boys on, put 3 boys on to show them how there's more or less deflection. And then we also have an aluminum bridge model that's put together with bolts, so you can take out different members. You can change a member from a solid angle iron of aluminum to a piece of chain to show them how different members are in tension or different members are in compression. Our third one is explain the work of 6 types of engineers. We're including this through the entire merit badge. Each one of the activities they're working on, we have a short discussion and talk to them about what types of engineers would be doing that type of work and how different types of engineers would work together in a team to actually bring a product. The main one we're doing is called a hovercraft. So we are making a model hovercraft out of styrofoam. We're using the styrofoam that you would get from a restaurant when they give you your leftovers. So we're using those, and we're cutting them up to make a base and fins of a hovercraft, and then using a plastic straw and a balloon for the power for those. That comes from a website called hovercraft.org, and all the pieces are there, as well as all of the directions on how to do it. So we're using that one, and talking to them about the design process. If you were in a factory setting or you were in a design setting and you needed to create a hovercraft, we talked to them about, okay, what were the main things you need to think about? So they will give different suggestions, different thoughts. So we talked about, well, what weight do you need? What is the purpose of this hovercraft? Are you going to be hauling things long distance, short distance? What types of materials would you use? How strong do they need to be? What kind of engine would you need? And then talking to them about how our prototype is the basis for each one of those. So the balloon and the air coming out of the balloon would be your power source. You talk to them about different types of power sources. It could be electric, it could be solar, it could be diesel run. Would you be able to pedal it? So we talk about all those different types of scenarios and different ways that they could potentially put their hovercraft together. And then we actually build the hovercraft. We provide scissors, we provide tape, and some direction, and then they go to work creating those. And through the whole thing, we talk about the different types of engineers and the different types of engineering that would be involved through quality control, through how you'd actually get it to manufacturing and transportation. So we talk about all the different pieces. Visit with an engineer. That is tied in pretty closely to number 3 on the 6 types of engineering. So we include that discussion as well on each of the activities that we're doing with the Scouts. The hovercraft is a big one again, where they're talking directly with the volunteers about what would their role be, what type of engineering are they in, and how would that tie into the overall product that we'd be producing. The 5th requirement, use engineering systems approach to make plans for your next camp out. For those of you who are familiar with the Gantt chart, we have a large Gantt chart that we have put on a large, 2 large pieces of paper so we can divide the Scouts up, and then we've had it laminated and taken individual tasks and laminated those. So we'll have things on there like build a campfire, and that has a duration of 30 minutes. We'll have prepare dinner. That has a duration of an hour. Sleep. They have to sleep for 8 hours. So we'll have all these different tasks. They might go horseback riding. They might play a game. They might put up their tents. So all these different pieces. So we have more tasks than what they can possibly do in a camp out, and then they need to make choices, what types of things they're going to do. And we talk about, from an engineering side and how it relates to camping, how you can have tasks that are end-to-end. So one has to come before the next. You can't cook dinner until you make your campfire. We talk to them, you can't go to bed until you've set up your camp and have your tent set up. And we also talk to them about concurrent tasks. So some of the troop might go horseback riding while some of the rest of the troop might go hiking. And so we talk to them from an engineering standpoint and talk to them about an engineering type project on how that would be set up the same way with concurrent and separate tasks, how all those pieces go together. Number 6 is transforming motion and moving people. That's one of those areas where you pick 2 out of a list of 6. So there are several different things you can do. Transforming motion is one. Using electricity, using materials, converting energy, moving people, and science fair. The science fair is building an engineering product for a science fair. That does not work very well in a workshop setting, but those are the 6 different requirements that you can use. So for our purposes, what worked best was to use the transforming motion and moving people. We've had one of our volunteers build a catapult as well as a trebuchet. So we are using those, and he also built a series of levers with different fulcrums and different amounts of weight. So we are taking the Scouts through, showing them similar to how a teeter-totter would work by moving the fulcrum to different spots, putting different amounts of weight on the end, and then we start with probably having our smallest Scout and having him relatively easy lift a large weight by where the fulcrum is placed. And we get the largest, beefiest Scout, and we slide the fulcrum down and put a smaller weight on there and see how much he may struggle by trying to push that up. So we really talk about that transforming motion and how the change in fulcrum, how that affects your ability to do work. and then take that the next step to showing them catapults and trebuchets. This is one of the spots where we use large peanut M&Ms and put those into the catapults and trebuchets and let them fire those across the room, measure who gets the best distance, who's the winner of having the best shot with their trebuchet and their catapult. So that one's very popular. We also do, for moving people, we do a traffic analysis and traffic signals where we are at the Department of Public Works. They have a shop right there in their Public Works office where they work on traffic signals. So we show them how, if they came up to a corner, how traffic signals work, how activating the different electric fields, it can show if a left turn lane is going to come on or if it's not going to come on, how the timing works, if you press the button to walk across the street as a pedestrian, how that works into the timing of all the rest of the signals. And then we also show them a traffic analysis of, by adding a lane or taking a lane away or adding a center turn lane, how all those help to move people and how that affects the different timing and the efficiency of people moving through there. And again, one of the important things is talking about what types of engineers do that type of work. So when we talk about the traffic signals, we say a lot of the analysis civil engineers would work on, but electrical engineers would be working on the signals and the signal machinery. Mechanical engineers would be working on the pieces that go into the road. So tying all the different parts together and how a team would work on those. The seventh requirement is discuss high school coursework to prepare for engineering. I use both that one, actually all three of those I'm doing at the beginning, an opening session and a closing session, and that's where we're talking about those. So that's more asking the scouts questions, talking to them about what types of things do you think you'd need to have as an engineer. And not only talking about the fact that they need math and they need science, they're all pretty good at guessing those things or bringing those up, but then taking them on to the next piece of that. You need to be able to write reports, so English is important. You need to be able to speak well and talk to groups, present ideas. So talking to them about the importance of speech, talking to them about the importance of, if you want to go overseas, you need to be able to talk to people of other cultures and different languages. So how important knowing other languages are. Talking to them about the business side. So business is also important. So stressing to them that yes, it's thought of as a math and science type of profession, but there's a lot of other pieces to it as well. Explaining what it means to be a registered professional engineer. I talk to them about what registration means and compare that and contrast it to other types of professions. What you do as a policeman, what you would do if you were a doctor, what you would do in other professional type of professions, and how engineering would compare to that. And then there's also the ninth requirement is compare the engineering code of ethics to the Scout Oath and Scout Law. So I've taken both the Scout Oath and Scout Law and taken some of the main parts out of there and then comparing it to the engineering code of ethics. So if you talk about the Scout Law, a Scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly. So we've compared that to an engineer is guided by the highest standard of honesty. Engineers shall act for each employer as a faithful trustee. An engineer serves the public interests. Engineers shall give credit to engineering work for whom the credit is due. So I go through, I don't hit every point, but I go through a good amount of the Scout Oath and Scout Law and then talk about the very similar parts that are in the engineering code of ethics. Okay, the next main part is once you have your program set up and the different pieces you want to do, you need to do coordination with your Boy Scout office. And you want to start that fairly early, depending on the Scout office. Sometimes it takes a while depending on what they have for staff and how organized they are. So you want to contact them fairly early and start talking about some of the specifics. The Boy Scout office typically covers things like insurance for the activity you're having. Since if it's a sanctioned Boy Scout activity and you have the Scout office involved, then they will cover the insurance. Registration, typically most of them have a website where they will advertise the event. They will send it out to all the local Boy Scout troops you sort of give them a radius of how far you want it sent out, and they will take care of that advertising side of it for you. They will also work with you to create an announcement for the event that will go onto their website. It will talk about what's going to be done there, that you're going to meet all the requirements, what they're supposed to bring with them. If they're supposed to bring pens and pencils, of course, if they're supposed to bring the engineering merit badge book and have read it ahead of time. So all of those types of things would be on that announcement they would work with you on. One of the things we have done, we did not do the first couple of years, but we've done since, are create a patch. All the Scouts really tend to like having a patch that's associated with an event they went to. So there are different companies out there, and the Boy Scouts they will give you, let you know what those different organizations are and who they typically work with. And you can create your own patch for your event with the date on it, engineering merit badge, really any other information you want. Multiple colors if you want. We typically do a 3-color badge with the date and the name on there and who's sponsoring it. And those have been very well received. The blue cards, a blue card is the official designation that shows that they received a merit badge. Those would typically come from their counselor. In this case, for the workshop, one of your volunteers or somebody associated with the Boy Scouts who is a counselor will be signing those merit badges, or those blue cards for the merit badge. It can be done a couple ways. Some of the Boy Scout offices actually produce those. They will take the registration list and they will produce those along with, like in my case, I sign them with my signature on those. Some of them want you to sign them right at the event. That becomes a little bit cumbersome sometimes, depending how many Scouts you have. But the one where the Boy Scout office we work with here, they will allow us to sign those blue cards ahead of time and have them ready for the Scouts. Assuming that they're going to be there the entire day and finish all the requirements. If they don't, you can always hold back the blue cards at the end from those who decide to leave or not engaged and don't do all the requirements. Your registration info, most of the websites, when they put all the info in, it's good to work with your Scout office and tell them the kind of information that you're going to want to have. One of the years we did not get all the info. We did not ask for the age of the Scouts. So I would suggest asking for their age, what rank they are, their email address so you can contact them if something changes, phone number, their address, and what troop number they're in so you can get an idea how many different troops you're impacting or how many different troops are attending your event. Once you get all those ages and ranks, we go through and we try to create our groups. We'll divide up depending how many Scouts we have. We usually go about 10, no more than 10 Scouts in a group. And so typically with our about 60 Scouts, we have about 6 different groups that are rotating through. And in the early year, we had divided them up more by tried to keep the troops together. We found that did not work as well because you had all ages. Typically, the ages of the Scouts are between 12 and 17. And the younger Scouts with the older Scouts, they just have different types of questions and a lot of different interests. So we found it's better to put as many of their ages as close together as you can. So you have a group of older Scouts typically, and then 2 or 3 groups in the middle that are sort of the middle ages, and you'll have 1 or 2 groups of the young Scouts. And each of your presenters then can tailor their presentations and their activities and any questions they're asking of the kids more towards either the younger or the older Scouts and get more in-depth discussions. And then lastly is reimbursement and cost. Most of the Scout offices, they leave it up to you as far as what you want to charge or if you want to charge for the event. We have found that charging at least a nominal fee, we usually charge like $10, is really helpful. And a lot of the SAME troops, or SME groups are willing to fund those as part of their outreach. But we have found if they at least have to pay something, even as nominal as $10, then they more often tend to show up. The first year when we did not get a registration fee and SAME just paid the small amount of money we needed to put the event on, you had scouts who signed up but then didn't show up. They had no skin in the game. So I would suggest at least putting a nominal fee to help out to get people to attend. It also helps your local Boy Scout office. They get whatever funds are left over after that, and that's always a help to them as well. As far as reimbursements, then really the only things that we put in reimbursements for to the Scout office, and that can be up to your local SME post what they want to put in. We usually get reimbursed for the food and the price of creating the patches or the badges, but other than that, usually the Boy Scout office ends up making a little money out of it. All right, food and activities. Food is critically important. You've got young boys and they're all about food. So have snacks, have drinks, have lunch. When we do our evaluations at the end, food is typically one of the main things that shows up on there. If they like the food, a lot of times they like the event. So we get pizza, we make sure we have plenty of pizza so everybody can stuff themselves as much as they want. So think about food. Then hands-on activities is probably the second most important after food. The more hands-on activities you can have, the better. Whenever we do our evaluations at the end, the more hands-on it is, the better they like it. There's still the learning side, but if they have something they can be doing to really learn it, that's very important. Engage with them, have discussions. You know, if you can have multiple volunteers at each one of your stations, that's all the better, so they can be individually talking with scouts and explaining to them what they're seeing and what they're doing. Getting wet and dirty. We have a couple activities. One is a water table where it has sand, and we show how erosion occurs, how water flows through. They love that one. They come out of there, you know, with sand all over their hands, and they get dirty on that one. They like to break things. We had one year where we were breaking concrete cylinders. They really enjoy that. They like seeing things fall apart. They like when we use the Catapult, they like throwing the M&Ms across the room and see them shatter on the concrete floor. So they're boys. They like to break things, they like to throw things, they like to get wet and dirty. So keep that in mind. The more hands-on type of activities you can do and the less sitting around having them watch something. PowerPoint for sure I would not do. You know, have some easels up with some pictures on it if you want to show them something. But one year we had a guy do a PowerPoint, and that was just not the right thing to do. Other items to consider. Your volunteers, when you're getting volunteers, if they have kids of their own or kid experience working with the Boy Scouts or other ways, that's always a plus. Those volunteers we've had who have not been as familiar with kids or knowledgeable about kids, they sometimes tend to talk either over their heads or it's kind of a dry presentation. You need to try and appeal to kids if you can. Having tour guides is a good idea. For each one of our 6 groups, we have somebody identified as basically their tour guide to take them around, get them to the right place at the right time, and get them to lunch at the right time, answer any questions they have. You know, they forget where the bathrooms are, so that's been a plus for us to have a tour guide. We've also had older scouts help out. If we have some scouts who, you know, they may be Eagle Scouts or they may have already had the merit badge and they're interested in getting some volunteer hours, having them come along to help has been a real plus as well. And then, as I said, we do evaluations at the end. So we ask them questions about, you know, what was their favorite activity? What was their least favorite activity? As a result of the clinic, did you learn more about engineering? Did it run smoothly? So, you know, we ask them all types of different questions just to help us to try and make the event better each year. And every time when you ask them about what was their favorite, it was always those that they had more hands-on type of activities and they got dirty. The ones where they didn't get to do as much were always towards the bottom. So again, as much as you can, hands-on, and let them dig into stuff and get dirty. And then media. We have typically worked with both the newspapers. We've talked to the radio. So early on, we got quite a bit of interest. Television stations. So it's worth contacting them after you've done it for a few years. They're not as interested anymore as you'd expect, but it's good publicity for the Boy Scouts as well as for what we're doing for engineering. All right, here's just some photos as I'm kind of wrapping up. Show you some of the things that we've done. This is our bridge model that comes in different pieces, has different spans. There's bolts at each connection, so you can take them apart, take out pieces, show them what would happen if one of those members broke, put in a piece of chain for each of those members to show if they're in compression or they're in tension, how they would fail if one of them was not there. This is our circuits. So again, just small batteries, wires, light bulbs, showing them how things are hooked up in parallel, how they're in series, and explaining to them how circuits are set up. This is our Gantt chart. So if you can see, I don't know how clearly it came through, but there's different tasks, and each one of those is laminated, and they can slide them around across the top. We have it's set up for a 24-hour day, and they're mandated to put in, they have to sleep at a certain time, so we say lights out is 10 p.m., so that's a task that has to sit at 10 p.m. that night. They can't move that around and say we're not going to sleep. So talking to them about how a Gantt chart would work and setting it up for a project. This is for our soils. Pictures of, we're going through a screening process, so we'll put a handful of sand and gravel and a very fine soil inside of those pans and show them how you sieve out, it's called a sieve, how you sieve through different sizes of materials and how that would affect your project, or how the designer would determine what types of soil enhancements he would need depending on what kinds of soils he has. And that's on the bottom right-hand corner. Top left would be, actually they get to get dirty. You can see to the left there's a pan there, so we have some fine clays. We add some water to it, and then that little machine that they're using there is for doing Atterberg limits, so they determine on what their reactivity of those soils are. This is creating our hovercraft with the balloons. So they cut out a hovercraft out of styrofoam, put the fins on it, put the balloon on, and they can create their own hovercraft. This is where they get to get dirty to some degree. We talk to them about lock and dam models and show them up on the left-hand side. Then on the bottom corner, we have a flood table. So you can put little houses in there. There's a stream, and the pieces on top, by pouring water in it, it simulates rain. You can also put in a piece at the bottom that has sponges that shows how a wetland would work. There's a piece where you can put in a parking lot to show how quickly water runs off the parking lot, as opposed to what it would run off if it was an open field or a wetland. This is one where they really get to get dirty that they enjoy. We have a sand table. So there's an outlet at the top end and a drain at the bottom end, and it's full of sand. So you put in different types of culverts, different types of materials, and show them how that would affect erosion and how you would route something through by reinforcing the banks, or when you get a flood, what types of impacts those have on your different structures. And then this is our Catapult and Trebuchet. We're out in the big bay at Public Works, so they can launch their peanut M&Ms and they hit the floor and shatter. So this is also a real popular one for them because they get to break stuff. Okay, I don't know if there's any questions out there, but if there are, that is the end of my presentation.
Thanks, Roger. We actually have a bunch of questions. One of them is, how long does this event last? Is it, what does the day look like?
We start out at typically 9:30 in the morning. We set it to always tell them about 15 minutes ahead of when you're going to start because they tend to show up a little late. So if we're going to start at 9:30, we'll tell them to be there at 9:15, or it kind of depends how far you expect to have people coming from. You don't want them on the road too early, but somewhere between 9 and 9:30 we start in the morning and go till about 4 in the afternoon.
Cool. Do scouts need to complete work outside of your event to complete the merit badge?
There is a merit badge book for each of the merit badges, and the ones that do that ahead of time actually go through the merit badge book, get the most out of it. Different scout troops kind of have different procedures. Some of them really push it and require their scouts to read them. Some don't, and so those tend not to. But no, if they just come to the merit badge workshop without having done anything, they still gain the merit badge, but then it's up to their own troop to decide if they've met all the requirements or not, if they haven't done the reading ahead of time.
Sure. What are the total number of volunteers do you suggest to put on a successful event?
We typically have about 10 to 15. Again, it depends how many scouts you have coming, but when we typically have about 60 scouts, we usually have about 15 volunteers. We've had as many as 20, but if you have many less than 15, then you don't have enough to cover having tour guides and all those types of things. So about 15 is about the number you need.
What do you do to address Boy Scouts of America Youth Protection Training, YPT standards? I'm not familiar with those, but...
Yes, anybody who's associated with the Boy Scouts needs to have the youth protection training, and then there needs to be somebody on site who has had that training. So in our case, there's a couple of us who have had Boy Scouts and associated with the Boy Scouts. So we have had the training, and we make sure then that all the requirements are being met. And it would be the typical things you would expect. No adults alone with a scout at any time, so there's always at least 2 adults in the room at any time. The scouts are always supposed to be in pairs, so no individuals going to the restroom by themselves, all those types of things. So it's all the different types of recommendations you have for any type of youth event, but you do need to have somebody there that has had the youth protection training. And if you do not have any of your volunteers that have had it, if you work with your Boy Scout troop, a lot of times they will have somebody that will come over and fill that role for you.
Oh, okay. Do you do partial blue card sign-offs?
We do not. We've had those requests in the past, and it just gets, logistically, it gets very difficult. Because then if you say you're going to, right on our announcements, we say you need to stay for the whole thing to get your card. Because we have requests from, you get a call from one mother who says, well, my son needs to go to violin practice, so he can't be there for this hour. Can you, just not mark him for that one? But it gets then very difficult, not only for us to keep track of who was there when, but also then when you send them back to their Boy Scout troops, they need to have somebody who's a merit badge counselor for the engineering merit badge to be able to fill in those pieces. And so we tried it one year, and then we totally got away from it. Just said, you're either there for the whole thing or, come another year.
Do you provide Boy Scouts of America merit badge counselors during the event?
Yes. Again, there's a couple of us that fill that role, and so that have been through the training and are familiar with Boy Scouts. So yes, we do provide a counselor that can sign off on the blue cards and are aware of all the requirements.
Awesome. That's all the questions we have. One of the questions was, can we get a copy of the presentation? Roger said that he'll email me the presentation, and I'll make that available on our website. So if you were to go to our website under Get Involved, there's a Post Resource Center. So the recorded webinar will be posted there, and then the PowerPoint presentation that Roger has created will be also available for anybody to use. And again, this is a fully recorded webinar, so you'll see the audio and the video and the PowerPoint slides that he's created, and all of the questions and answers will also be in the recorded webinar, okay?
Okay.
Again, Roger, thank you so much for working on developing this presentation. On behalf of SAME, I want to express our appreciation to you and everyone who participated today. We hope our webinar has been valuable. Roger, do you have any final thoughts?
No, I would just suggest for everybody, you know, if you haven't done this and you're considering it, it's well worth the effort. The Scouts really seem to enjoy it, and it does a lot of good things for engineering. So, good luck.
Thanks, Roger. Appreciate it. Have a good day, guys. Thanks.
You too.